In here, let us now create the if you are writing anything code or Python code inside HTML, you should always remember to put it inside a template literal by just having your curly braces and you put the percentage sign in front. So that is how to put code, Python code inside HTML if it's a Django application. So for now, let's look through. Don't forget, I told you that when you do the object.all, the way we are querying our data, our record here, we are doing the object.all. This will return an, okay, let me put it as a comment. This will return an array of objects. An array of objects. So what I'm trying to do there is I want to loop through each element of the array. I want to loop through each element of the array. So the first one, the first student will take this. The second iteration we take this, the third iteration we take this, the fourth iteration we take this. So now let's come back to our index. So I want to loop through the student. Don't forget that I'm passing it as students. Sorry, passing it as students. So I should just come here for student. That this student is for each iteration in, this is Python, in students. So for each, of course, anytime you call any functionality, you should always remember to close it so that Python or Django, we have an idea of where the logic is ending. So I then come here and for each iteration, I want to call a row, a table row, and table row will be, each table row we have a table data, each row we have a table data, and inside here I'm going to be having a double curly braces, and for each iteration I'm going to be having, of course, you know that for each row, the each row we now have, the first row we have first name, last name, age, emails, phone is registered, date join. So here under the first column I want to have my first name. And don't forget the way my model was defined. I have first underscore name. So what I'll just do, I'll just duplicate this line using, I hold down shift and alt and I press it down arrow. So and I have the last name here, I have the last name, and I also have the age, and of course I have my action. So I'll just leave this action blank. This is what we are going to be using to navigate to the details page. So let me just give it view. Of course we'll be using that later. So let's save it and see it in action. So you come back to your HTML page and refresh, and you can see now. So I try to zoom in our HTML page. Now you can see now that we have it all displayed, the first name, the last name, which is the heading, and you can see that the record was all generated from the database. Like when we checked the database earlier, this was the same set of record that we have. So that is that. For you can see that we have been able to get data from the database now successfully. So on the last note now, let us now work with the details page so that when I click on the view Jim Doe, it takes me to the details page of Jim Doe. And when I click on John Dim, when I click on view, it takes me to the details data model. Now let's just come to our view now. Of course, we want to define another. Of course, don't forget when we look at this place, you see that all 28 students. Let us get the number of students that we have in the database so that we, instead of us to say all 28 students, now we can see that we have 2 students. So you should say all 2 students. So let's see how that work, and let's see that in action. So what you just need to do is just come here. Of course, this is not needed again, and we then go total students. Of course, you can call it anything you like, but make sure that your variable name, they are always very descriptive so that we are going through your code, you have an idea of what you are doing. So what you just need to do, just say student, which is what you have here. to query all the students, just call a function called count. So you count the number of students that you have inside this array. Don't forget this will return a query array, which is an array of objects, and it will attach it to students. So we are leveraging on the student that we have gotten from the database, and we are just counting the number of elements in that array. So what you now need to do is, now that you have the student, just pass it down to your template by putting it inside this curly braces. So just say comma, and you have your total students, and you then attach this to total students. So we are passing this total student now to our template. So what you now need to do is come to your index.html, and don't forget that this is where you have your title. This is where you have your title. So the same thing you are doing here is what you'll be doing. Just have your double curly braces. Notice that when we want to pass a variable, or a variable, we are using double curly braces. But when we want to write logic, we are using curly braces and percentage. So you should pay attention to that. If you want to write logic like for loop, you want to write logic like do while, you want to write logic like, maybe you want to write an array, you want to start a block, you want to create a block, you should use the curly braces and percentage. But if you want to write a variable inside the HTML template in Django, you should use the double curly braces. So now in here, we want to just display a particular variable. We are not writing the logic. So that means you are going to use a double curly braces. And anytime you open the double curly braces, remember to close it. So all you just need to do is just call, what did we call it? Total students. Of course, it should be the same. It should be the same. Imagine if you look in here, if I say total students, plural, I should not come here and say total students. It will not work. Let's see. It will definitely not work. So if you refresh now, you see that we only have all students. It's telling me that okay, I'm supposed to display something here, but what I have here is currently empty. So what you just need to do is just come in here and add your correction, which is to make sure it is the same spelling with what you have here. So if you save it now, you see that we are going to be having all two students, because currently we have two records inside our database. So now that we have that, let us now come in here to our views, and let us define a function to display the student details. So we then go the way dev, we then go the way student detail, and of course this is a details page whereby you are expecting, as part of the parameter of the URL, you are expecting the ID of that particular student. Like for example, when the user click on this first student, maybe I click on view the students, it should give me the ID of the student, so that I can be able to use the ID to generate the record of the student from the database and display the details of the student. And the same thing, when I click on this, it should give me the ID of the student, so that I can use that ID to generate the details of the students in the database and attach it to the user interface, or to the website, or to the front end, anything you might call it. So now in here, what we need to do is that we should not just pass request, we should also attach the name. Of course, let's paint this for now. Let me just comment it out, and I just come in here, and of course you definitely know that I want to use this last view to navigate the user to the details page. So let me just make this an a tag. Let me just make this an a tag. So let me just call this view, and in this view we are going to be having the href, which is the link. the link. So this link, I will then have it as a Django logic, which is the brackets and percentage sign. So in here I am going to be having URL, and the URL I want to navigate to is that I want to navigate to the student details. So you see the student details when I name it later. So student detail, and apart from navigating to that student details, I want to also pass a parameter to it, and the parameter I want to pass to it is the ID of this particular student, or the current current iteration. So what I just need to do is just call the ID of that student, which is or this current iteration. And we don't forget that when we check our migration earlier, we saw that though we did not add ID to the model, but automatically Django help us to hide ID. So it is this ID that I am using in here. No, sorry, I am using in here. So dot ID. So when I let me now go to my URL and define the URL. So now I want to define the URL. So it will also be a path. It will also be a path, and I want a dynamic value. Of course, you see that this one is a constant value. Once you just come to the default page, you just take it to the home page. I want a dynamic value, which is the ID of the current of the record that the user click on. So all I just need to do is just use this less than and greater than sign, or anything you might call it, and I want a value called integer, and the name I want to attach to that integer variable that is being generated automatically is that I want a student. I want to call it student underscore ID. Take note of this name. It is this name that you should use when you are navigating, when you are, of course, you see it in action here. So like if I uncomment this now and I'm expecting student underscore ID, I should not say ID here. It is wrong because inside here, inside when I'm defining the URL, I name the value of the dynamic variable I'm getting now. That means for this now, it will now be the URL will now be equals to the default. Let's our website is coding school, which is the default page.com. This will come to the index page, but when you now see /1, that is when this one will now be the student ID. Now let's say I want it to be /student/1. So instead of me to just say int student ID, I will then come here and say student. Of course, I expect it to come to the slash, so you can see. So this will now go to student, which is a constant, then add a dynamic value of that is an integer, but in this case it is 1, and it can be 3 sometimes, depends on the ID of the record. It can be 10 another time, depending on the ID of the record. So now that I have that, I will then go, okay, I don't want to just have student because we are building a very simple application for now. I will then go this, I believe you understand the concept now. I will then go views, I'll call my views again, and don't forget that the view function for the student details is, let me just say, return an empty string. So the student details function is what I want to use. Don't forget, for the first one I use the index function. Now for this one I want to use the student detail. I'll come in here and say the view is student detail, which is a function